Yaakov, in case there's any new participant. Ein Yaakov is the parts of the Gemara which are considered more homiletical, which are the stories of the Gemara, which are the lessons of the Gemara. And even though some people would say that the more scholarly people are studying the deep sugyas of Shas, the greatest depths, and this is for more simple people, it's actually the exact opposite. That's one thing to learn halacha, black, white, but then shama of Yiddishkeit, that's really contained in the Ein Yaakov. So much so that 2 points. The first of all, the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, says that studying the Ein Yaakov takes precedence over studying regular Gemara. In the laws of Hilchos Talmud Torah, the laws of studying Torah, it says, essentially what it says is that anything which is connected to halacha l'maisa, which means connected to action, takes precedence. So in other words, learning Shulchan Aruch, how to conduct yourself in the morning, in the afternoon, how to keep Shabbos, kosher, anything associated with halacha takes before anything else within the realm of learning. In Gemara, this is the ultimate. Shulchan Aruch says the laws of so it says that included in those halacha is the parts of the Gemara which tell you which are level, which have lessons for life, and because that practically tells you how to be a Jew, tells you what it means to be a Jew. An amazing thing that it actually takes precedent. That was point one. And point B, which is a derivative of that, is that our ancestors in Eastern Europe, people come from different places. Poland, Hungary, Galicia, Ukraine, Russia, Belarus. I don't know about places like Germany, and so I assume 200, 300 years ago was the same there as well. But up until 100 years ago, in all of these countries that I just delineated, the main study of most Jews was Ein Yaakov. Keep in mind also, there was no Daf Yomi also. This was the bar of a Jew. People are working. Not everyone was so learned necessarily. You came to shul, and between Mincha and Ma'ariv, you came to shul in the evening after a hard day's work. Not necessarily were able to work into the night either those days. So you come to shul, and there was a shir in Ein. And listen, you don't mess with success. The Jews survived the back-breaking golus, the pogroms, the persecutions. Something kept them going. So of course we know Shabbos kept them going and everything, but we would be foolish not to give some credit to the Ein Yaakov, to this, the fact that the Jews had the Torah and everything they had to offer, and were able to conduct their lives accordingly. Okay, with that introduction, what I want to do is look again at the Gemara that we did last time. We're going to go a drop further. Just to read, we should all get it, and with some important points which are very interesting. What we started looking at was a statement of Amr Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Yeshua ben Levi made a statement. Yeshua ben Levi is famous that for being one of the few people who never died. By the way, Eliyahu Hanavi, most famous person who never died, was Elijah the prophet. But then the less famous, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said it has to do with his level of purity. Who doesn't pass away? Who just goes straight to heaven? Someone whose body, their very physical existence, has become a spiritual entity. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, but of course he's applying it to every Jew, that a person should never utter a coarse expression, a disgraceful, a lowly expression from his mouth. And he learned it from the pasuk by Noach, where the pasuk adds words. Instead of saying a tamei animal, an impure animal, it says an animal which is not pure. And asher einena I'm sorry. And asher einena tahira is is 8 letters. So he says the Torah added 8 letters, very significant. And then other people brought other sources about a man having a seminal emission, which is considered a negative thing because unless it's done in the context of intimacy, which in those psukim it's bringing, it's not, then it's considered to be it's a negative thing that a person's having thoughts and they're not living up to the ideal of spirituality, especially as described by Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. So, fine. That was statement number 1. Statement number 2, which we last time lumped them together as being the same thing, we're going to see in a moment that not necessarily is that so. Those make another layer, another level in terms of speech. What does it say in the Brayse? Ein Yaakov Shmuel, the Academy of Rabbi Shmuel taught. And they said, Le'elam saper adam b'lashon nikiyah. In a clean language. So first of all, over here, it's not saying in the negative, it's saying in the positive. The previous statement was, Al yetzi adam, a person should never utter from his mouth. Here we're always speaking positive language. It doesn't describe negativity here, besides being in the positive. It's saying the kiyum is very clean. Is it the same thing? You could easily learn it the same thing. But it actually brings different proofs. It brought an interesting proof about that it's interesting to note, they say. There's an impurity, which is that a person is impure, and they give that impurity to the object that they sit on, a chair, a bed. And when it comes to a man, literally the same, it's described in halacha as the same kind of impurity, zava versus a zava. By a man, it says, it says married, by a woman, it says Moshe. It says something, and riding equipment, and by a woman, it says equipment. Why the distinctions? He said, because it's less appropriate by a woman to describe.
You're cutting in and out, Mendel.
How about now?
Now it's fine. The picture's frozen too.
Okay. How about the recording, though? Hopefully the picture will come back soon.
The recording's good now.
Okay. Fine. Perfect. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the reason why it's interesting to note, and we're going to see in a moment, but the sensitivity of how do you describe the position of a woman, whether she's riding a horse or whether she's sitting in a side saddle position, basically where you sit in that kind of way, is even a higher level of sensitivity, clearly, and calling something disgusting or lowly or shmuk in Yiddish, maguna, right? Seems a level of sensitivity. Not necessarily is the Academy of Rabbi Mendel describing the same thing as the previous statement. He's describing a much higher level of sensitivity. The way a person could speak in such refined tongue that they never mention anything which implies anything improper. And he brought different proofs that it applies not only in the written Torah, but even by rabbinical traditions, they're so careful about their tongue. And then in addition, he brought a third proof that applies to speech that we have in all scenarios. Fine. Then I'm going to skip a little bit in this summary we have learned. The Gemara asked a bunch of questions that we find there are places where we do describe women as riding certain things. And For the same price, here's the question of the Gemara. This proves your theory, the Gemara says. The fact that the Torah sometimes describes women riding animals, even though he claims, according to Rabbi Shmuel's academy, he's arguing that it's inappropriate to talk about a woman when you're able to use a better expression. When you're able to use, because, so here's a very important point. Rabbeinu Chananel explains. Even if a woman happens to be riding an animal, I don't have to use the expression riding, because when you're sitting, it's not a contradiction. Why do I have to get into the detail describing what position the woman is riding in, and therefore that's considered appropriate as you could be. Therefore, the Gemara asks the question. I find certain places where it uses the word riding. Last week's Torah portion, Rivka was riding on the camel. Other places, and the Gemara basically answered each of those places that where women would actually sit in such a scenario. So, for example, a camel is such a high animal, and it's so precarious. The Gemara says that it's an abnormal expression. It's not normal. Every woman rides such an animal, and therefore there's nothing wrong with saying that she rode the animal. It's not that you chose an expression when you could have used a better expression. You're going against logic. You're going against reason by not describing what happened. You're going to ignore the reality. The Torah wants to tell you a story, what happened. And so to the other example, and therefore there's nothing immodest, there's nothing describing the reality. The Gemara then continues and says the big question. Does the Torah not use the word impure? Your hope is that by Noach, instead of saying that the impure animals with the ark,
we keep losing you, Rabbi.
Yeah, no, we got disconnected for a second. We just got connected. Hopefully this helped that the screen should be unfrozen. Is that the case?
Yes,
just talking, but it's up.
The screen, did the screen unfreeze?
Yeah, until you said unfrozen.
Okay. No, that's an advantage when it turns off for 30 seconds. That it brings a. Okay. So the Gemara asked, your whole proof seems to be doesn't make any sense. The word tamei is used hundreds of times later. What's going on? So the Gemara then gave the rule. And this is where we were holding, and this is where we're going to focus in right now. The Gemara said, what's the rule? Rather, this is how it works. Ella, now we're on 3b, a few lines in. Whenever the two things are the same length, you have to go with lashon naki. You have to go with a clean language. However, wherever there is more words, indeed, the Torah says we follow the shorter language, based on a different principle, because there's another principle that we have to follow in Judaism. As Rav Huna taught in the name of Rav, or Rav Huna taught in the name of Rav, in the name of Rav Meir. The Gemara is always very precise about with the source of the teaching. That a person should always make sure to teach their student derech ktsara, the shortest way possible, the most succinct way. That's the rule the Gemara laid out. The Gemara lays out. So now, let's try to figure out this rule for a second, okay? First of all, it seems to be a fascinating that whenever you're able to say it in a short language, you should say it in a shorter language. You know, there are many inappropriate words, first of all, that many people would say that this is the shortest way to say what I think. You know, if I start, the shortest way to say it is in a very not appropriate way. So the Gemara is saying that the Gemara seems to be saying that's preferable. Say the shortest way, and in other words, when it's the same, what does the Gemara say? When it's the same, you got to go with clean language. But when you're saying it shorter, there's a value of that you should teach your students. But here comes the real question: where did we learn? What was the source? Where did we learn that you have to speak in clean language? In the pasuk, over there, what did the Gemara spoke in a longer? What did the pasuk spoke in a longer language? It said more words. It's contradicting this conclusion. How is the Gemara arriving at this conclusion? When you say more words, you go with the worse expression, the less clean expression, which is why throughout the Torah it uses the word tamei. But then, how does it match with the rule that we gave by the pasuk by Noach? So there's a very simple level of understanding of Rashi, but others say that's not what Rashi means. But the simplest level of understanding of Rashi is that you're correct. The way the Gemara seems to read is exactly correct. That for some reason there's a tremendous value in truth. Some would even argue that there's a value in life of kindness versus truth. And those seems to be the two. We're going to see in a moment why it's relevant to truth to speak succinctly and precisely and as short as possible. So there's the value of preserving reality, preserving truthfulness. But then there's also a value of cleanliness, of kindness, of purity, of not denigrating. Two values. Rashi would seem to take it, if you look at Rashi, he seems to take it on its simple level. On the simple level. What is the simple level, seemingly? That seems to say is that you go with the shorter language always. Unless, that's exactly Rashi says, what about the fact that the person we're learning it from in the first place is speaking long? See, Rashi says a very simple thing. He says, how else would I rule? The Torah is trying to teach you this rule. How else would I know the rule if he didn't do that? If it wouldn't have been a place where the Torah out of its way and adds extra words, then I wouldn't have made it. I can't learn anything from it. The Torah happened to say it doesn't teach me anything. The fact that the Torah went out of its way and added more letters than it needed to, it added more words than it teaches the value of lashon naki, of speaking cleanly, and therefore, of course, when there's a conflicting value, you have to go with that value. But when there's no conflicting value, you're obligated to go with lashon naki, and that's what the pasuk teaches you. Okay, Rashi. Everyone disagrees with that approach, but this is Rashi's approach. It would be, and the reason why Rashi takes this approach is Rashi's the most simple reading of the text, both in the Chumash and in the Gemara, and that's his understanding of it. However, there's another perspective, which is the Marsha. Marsha is from the greatest commentary, and we actually mentioned his approach last. He argues, he says that no, as a matter of fact, he says the value. That's what the Gemara's conclusion is. Equal value. What is value? When I could say shorter, but less clean, or I could say it longer, but it's going to be clean. I could choose whichever one I wish. That's what he says. I could choose whichever one I wish. They're on equal footing. When they're the same, then you do it with clean language. So he says, that's how he reads the Gemara. He's saying you have permission. When it's more words, you have permission to speak in a shorter language, but it has no advantage. And how does he know this? From the very Pesukim themselves. The pasuk is longer and speaks cleanly. Elsewhere in the Torah, you have places. Elsewhere in the Torah, it speaks succinctly, but it speaks less appropriately. So we learned that you could do both. And according to the Marsha says, now I understand why we have a few verses which do this, not only one. We have a few verses. We have the verse about the seminal emission, 3 or 4 sources that are brought. Why one? One teaches you the value of speaking cleanly. And that already teaches you that if they're both, if all things the same amount of words, you have to go with clean language. But no, all of a sudden, when we have a few places where it does it. So he says it's very clear that when you have 2 options, a shorter but it's less clean, or longer and cleaner. You could go with whatever option you want. The Gemara understands from there, though, that if they're both the same amount of words, then you have no option for sure. Taita values cleanliness, right? And therefore, the reality is you have to go with that. That's very geschmackiya approach. In a moment, we'll explain the value of speaking shortly and how it retains the truth. But first, I want to read the final approach within the Rishonim. Rishonim is the early commentaries of the Gemara, what's studied in all the yeshivas. And I've been hinting at this pirush the whole night so far, which is he makes a distinction between the two schools of thought, between Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and between the Aryeh of Rabbi Shmuel. He says that there's a big debate in this Gemara. It's not the same thing. There's different grades of how careful a person is. He says that when it says a whole different level. And therefore, now he says, I understand. He says it actually has different laws, these different things. We're speaking about actual gnus, actual dirty language. Let's say the example I was giving before, I didn't use any particular curse words, but you can use your imaginations, right? When it comes to actual davar meguna, actual degrading words, degrading ideas, degrading way of speaking, that he says, he's very clear, lo olam, which means forever, al yoitzi adam davar meguna, never utter a davar meguna from your mouth. What's not understood about that? And he says that's what psukim that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi brought. The psukim that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi brought were indeed where it was longer language by Noach. The pasuk used longer expressions, but nevertheless, the Torah tells us that you have to go with a longer language because you're not allowed to say a terrible thing. Versus Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, he's talking about a much higher level of sensitivity, where you don't talk about the woman's position when she's riding an animal. That's a whole different level. And over there, so he says, this is the Balamar. This Balamar is he's one of the main people who argues with Nachmanides, the Ramban, one of the big Rishonim. He's the one who says this explanation. So the Balamar says, he says that the words tameh used in the Torah, when Torah says that things are tameh, he says that's not considered a davar meguna, disgusting, degrading. And this goes back to the explanation we were discussing last week. That when in a story time, like by Noach, when you're calling not kosher animals impure, tameh, you're degrading them, you're putting them down. For no reason, right? However, when it comes to halacha, says the Balamar, it's not degrading. I'm defining. I'm categorizing. Part of the world is permissible, part of the world is impermissible. It's very, the way we described it is very national. It's very clinical. It's like a doctor. You're giving a diagnosis. And therefore, he says, he agrees that there is a higher sensitivity you could have spoken, derech kavod, the honorable way, but you're not degrading anything. You're not bashmutzing. And therefore, over there, with this lesser level of sensitivity, he says, that's when we have this rule, that when all things are equal, when they're both the same amount of words, you go with the cleaner language. However, when it's going to be more words, he says, to be honest, you got to go with the other value in Judaism, which is to state your case, be very clear, let the truth speak. You can't ek and beck and beat around the bush. You got to say it as it is. Unless it's mamish or davar meguna, unless it's literally something negative. If it's not negative, if it's just you could have spoken in a more honorable expression, no. Go with you got to go with the value of lo'ilam yishna adam l'talmid derech tzara that you teach the derech tzara. Now, the explanation that we just gave as to why the pasuk describes a halacha, it's not denigrating. Because it's very clinical. So that's an explanation we gave before. There's a talk of the Rebbe on it. The truth is the Baal has this idea. but the other opinions who do indeed feel that the book is indeed denigrating when it says the word tamei halacha throughout the Torah, basically, they argue what they argue is Chedush Rabbeinu David talks about this, but Chedush Rabbeinu David is also one of the Rishonim. It sounds like it's an Achrin, like a later person, but it's not. It's from 800 years ago. So in Rabbeinu David says that the pasuk's way when it's a prohibition is to denigrate it, is to put it down, is to destroy it. He says, for example, when it talks about Avodah Zarah, it says shake aksenu v'sa'ef, disgusted, you should be disgusted, loathing, you shall loathe it. Really down. So he says an integral part is that you gotta put it down. You gotta destroy it in your eyes. You're trying to separate the person from the prohibition. So you have to somehow take the prohibition, lower it in people's understanding, that it's not just don't do it, that it's disgusting, that it's wrong, that it's denigrating. So the pasuk specifically is trying to do it that way. So that's by halacha you have to speak in that way, and that in a way, according to him, is what the Gemara is saying, that you have to say the truth as it is. They have to teach your student b'derech ktsara. What exactly is the value of b'derech ktsara? I understand it's better to teach your student b'derech ktsara. Is there some depth to this? To the extent that it's a clash of another value in Judaism. That's how serious we're taking it. And we were taught. You have to teach in a succinct way. So what is it all about? It's about is like this. In the end of the day, we have very small minds. Truth is very elusive. And if we ever need any reminders of how elusive the truth is, look around the world. Look at the confusion. Look at every direction you come from. Is conspiracy theory. Is everyone's making it up, and there's no everything is truly fake news. Everything. People start questioning their own reality. Who do I take seriously? Everyone says it was such a straight face. Go channel after channel, radio show after radio show. It's all. How do you preserve truth? And how does Judaism preserve truths over thousands of years, over hundreds of years? He retained truth. What is a key method in retaining truth and when something's true and when something's not true? And this is one of the secrets. The secret is that
Rabbi,
a true teacher. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
When I wanted truth, I talked to myself.
You got cut off for a second. I didn't hear you. Just repeat it one more time.
I said, when I wanted truth, I talked to myself.
You talk to yourself. Does it work? How's it going?
Always.
Always. There we go. Gotta speak to your neshama. Tap into your neshama. The trolls than anything anyone else could. They say common sense is not so common. Sometimes that's what it boils down to. That's the truth. Just have a conversation with yourself for a second. Absolutely. But that in itself is a challenge. How do you open up to yourself? So it's very interesting. It's very interesting. It would seem that the commentaries on this issue, and it's discussed a lot in Kabbalah and Chassidus, for whatever reason, this idea of teaching. It would seem that it's associated with the principle in Judaism of receiving from a master, from a what's always been referred to as a Rebbe. Rebbe has other connotations also, but a Rebbe means, it's a literal translation, a master. You follow a master. That's part of the system in Judaism. You'll find that even going back to the Torah itself, Moshe Rabbeinu, there's an obsession with Moshe Rabbeinu. Every third pasuk is like Moshe Rabbeinu. So really, it comes down to when you have a master teacher who wants to convey truths to his students. And these students are going to go on to live their lives. And they're going to read many things, and they're going to study many things, and they're going to develop that they've been taught. How do they retain? Never off. Never. He's not going to be able to teach them everything they know. You're going to go on. You're going to develop. The world develop. You develop. You're supposed to develop. That's the system of Judaism, of Torah. So the way it works is like this: is the person, the receiver, is not able to receive the true depth, breadth, and width of the concepts being discussed. So what he does is he finds a way, and this is the genius of the teacher. Only the greatest genius is able to take the genius and contain all of it, every last detail that will ever come out, to be contained in the following words. Everything you're going to do is going to come back to these words, and they're going to be a graph in these very succinct words that I'm going to give you. You see, a person who doesn't have a true deep understanding of the concept that they're teaching could only teach it in a very superficial, because they only understand it the way they understand it. They really got the true MS, the truth of what they're. So they understand it in a very particular fashion, with very particular example, and they can't get out of that box because they don't really understand the true depth of it. They don't live it. It's not their life. It's not them. But a true master, it understands in such a deep way, in such a truthful way, that he can bring it down on every level. So what happens? How do you do it? What's the methodology? Is that not that he cuts off pieces. He does an operation and chops away pieces that are over pieces and gets rid of them from the story. Rather, he does it in such a way that the hashpah that he's giving, this teaching that he's giving, contains everything. And now the receiver is able to receive it, right? Because it seems to be something that is able to receive, and nothing's lacking in terms of what he gets. However, as long as the makabel, the one who receives this item, he studies this and again, and he reads it again and again and angle. And with those few words that he has, he's able to arrive at the entire length, the entire breadth, all the details that come out of this. And nothing new will have been arrived at. It will all just be within this item of information that the person received. And that, of course, is the way of the Mishnah, that the rabbis of the Mishnah taught. Gemara, we could have many pages of discussion to figure out what does this line of the Mishnah mean. But it's all line. And this is why the Gemara tells us that you only understand what your teacher told you after 40 years have elapsed. That's what the Gemara says. Only 40 years later do you understand what your teacher told you. Now, obviously, we're not talking about where you go to sleep for 40 years and then you wake up and have an epiphany, and now I understand what he meant. What it means is that you've learned for 40 years, and only after you've been learning for 20 years every day studying. After 40 years, oh, that's what he meant. That's what he meant. You arrive, and why are you able to arrive at it? Because he gave everything you need to know to arrive at it, and to the truth from what he gave you. He said, so just to elaborate one more point within this, and this is how you're able to stay within the truth. Why is it so important for it to be bekitzer? Not just that you should be able to receive it, because he can't give you the whole breadth of the knowledge, but it's even deeper than that. That if he would give you all of the pilpul and all of the details and all of the logic and seichel and all of these brilliant, you would never be able to receive the truth of the matter. There's two explanations happening. What is the core truth? He has to give the kudas ha'emes, the point of truth. And if he wouldn't give you the point of truth, then you know what you could do with something you receive? You could arrive at the opposite conclusion of what your master was teaching you. Your mind could take you to a totally different place. There's actually a famous Mishnah in Ethics of Our Fathers, Mishnah Pirkei Avos, which literally teaches this concept, and it's the chapter, as a matter of fact, Mishnah 11, a very famous Mishnah. Avtalian's taught, and Avtalian said, he said, Chachamim hizaru b'divreichem. Scholars, be so careful with your words. So literal translation of what he says is, he says, maybe you'll be exiled to a place inhabited by terrible people, by evil elements, and bad waters. And the students who come after you will drink from these bad waters, and they're going to die. They're going to be poisoned. And the name of heaven will be disgraced. Now, clearly, he's speaking in remes. He's hinting. He's alluding. What's he saying? He's not necessarily referring that physically. Be careful with your words. Physically, you're going to be exiled somewhere. He means all of the ideas that you're teaching could go straight into exile. It could go into a place the opposite of everything you wanted to teach. You thought you're teaching one thing. Be so clear you're teaching and what you're saying. He says, you're going to be brought into exile. Every for is going to be in exile. And the students arriving at this place, they're going to drink from the poisonous waters in exile. And it's Hashem Shemayim Eschal. The name of Hashem is desecrated. So when he gives you just different ideas, you could stray from the Das HaEmes. These are the key words. The point of truth. It's the opposite. Into a place of falsehood, of additional things which are of the original idea, of mistakes. So the way the method is, you have to teach derech tzad. These words contain the whole or nekuda, the entire light of the point of truth. And person now has a path with which they can never, which with it's possible for them never to stray from the nekudas emes. And it's not because they always understand why this is the emes and something else is not the emes, right? Rather, they understand that anything which conflicts with this succinct idea that I received, there's anything which varies with it, it's off the table. It's not true. There's a power within that thing that he was taught which keeps the person in check. He should always go in the straight path. He doesn't understand the reason. And the truth is, the student it's possibly he doesn't even know where he gets it from, that he knows that this is wrong and this is right. It's not every time completely conscious. He thinks it's because he's so smart, Alec. He's so smart. He learned from his master. But it's more than that. It's that the master placed within this idea that anything which contradicts with this, you know that it's wrong. Just like when you have an actual interview, and he's constantly nudging you in the right direction. He's leading you, he's guiding you, right? What is the true reason? Pushing you. He's like a little kid. He's always getting you to go in the right direction. Over here, it's the same thing. Even though the master, the Rebbe could be long passed away, he's still guiding you. There's that still, the Nekudas Hamas, he gave you the truth, and anything which contradicts it is a contradiction. Which is why, by the way, that with all the questions that the Talmud asks, there could be dozens of questions and discussions. The moment it goes against the law of the Mishnah, the Gemara knows you throw it out the window. It's against the truth. It's not nothing to do. If it can't be contained by the words of the Mishnah, if the words of the Mishnah cannot mean this, it's out the window. Rabbeinu HaKadosh, the one, the author of the Mishnah, guided us and set us on the path of truth, which is where we have another Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, the 6th chapter, where it says that one of the things Torah scholars do is Ma'amidai al ha'emes. He places you on the path of truth. Ma'amidai al ha'emes. He places you on. And I just want to add one more thing in this value and this idea of la'olam yilmeid adam letalmidai derech tzara, that a Rebbe has to teach a student with derech tzara. The previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, previous Rebbe of Lubavitch of Chabad, the one where he had a tremendous history that he was dealing with from 1920 to 1950, the Rebbe. So he has a letter, very interesting letter. He writes that from this line of the Gemara where it says, to teach your student, that says it used the interesting word derech, a path of ktsara. It should have said, teach him big ktsara in a abbreviated version, in a succinct fashion. What's derech tzara? He says, we learn from here that every revelation that your master gives you is a derech, is a path. Don't ever think for a second that he told you something, it's not a derech. When you hear something from your Rebbe, we're obviously talking about a true master, it's a veg. In Yiddish, it's called a veg. He's mamidai al ha'emes. Stellt dem auf auf dem emes, they say in Yiddish. He's setting you up to the truth. But however, says the previous Rebbe, very important. Just because mamidai, the word in Hebrew, mamidai means he stands you up, al ha'emes. The path, you have to walk the path, the previous Rebbe said. That's the definition. Just because he puts you mamidai al ha'emes, he paved for you a path, he put you on the path, now you have to walk on the path. And this is a tremendous system within Yiddishkeit. Just for they say base medrash for Chiddush. So in our class, I just want to read one more piece of Gemara, so it shouldn't be reviewed. We should have one more thing under our belt. So there's a story here. The Gemara tells a story at Hanhu Tzrei Talmidoi Dahabe Yosvik Kamei Rav. The Gemara relates that there were two students who were sitting in front of Rav. This would have been in the middle of the 3rd century, if we want to have the time date. As a child, when he saw Rebbe, this would be around the year 240, 250. So two students are sitting in front of Rav. One of them said, the study that we just had wore me out like a pig. Like a pig. The word Hebrew for the way the Gemara refers to a pig, which itself is a sensitive thing to do, is always davar acher, something else. Davar acher. The other one said, the study made us worn out like a tired kid, meaning a baby goat. The Gemara relates, from then on, Rav never spoke to the first student. He found the student to be of little taste, basically, distasteful, that he would use such an expression, and he didn't engage him in conversation after he heard him describe in such a way, like a pig, worn out like a pig. And the brings down both students, even though it's trying to bring out one student, because it's trying to say, otherwise I could have learned that the story, to the commentaries say, otherwise I would have learned that the story is that he was upset at him that Torah wears you out. Why does Torah wear you out? You should love the Torah so much. Why are you worn out from the Torah? But the Gemara says, no, that wasn't his issue. That wasn't his issue. Torah could be wearing out. You have to continue anyways. That wasn't his issue. His issue was the expression. That's why he brought both. One of them he didn't have a problem with. He said, I'm worn out like a goat. One of them said, I'm worn out like a pig. It's totally inappropriate. It's interesting to have expressions used to do in order not to be sensitive to speaking in very refined tongue. So it's interesting to know that the word for pig, which is used in the Gemara of davar acher, the Rebbe was sensitive to that expression itself. The Rebbe used to say, which means it's the Rashi Tevis, it's the two letters which are named for davar acher. But even the word davar acher, like the euphemism used for a pig, now it became a word. It became something, that's what it means. So even that, he was sensitive to. He used to say Dalet Aleph, if he had to mention it. And it's interesting, I was just thinking, I'm not sure. He's saying that even the student said davar acher. That would be interesting. What if the student didn't use the word chazer? He didn't say pig. What if he said davar acher? Still, the fact he thought that it was unsafe for him to compare, to talk about a pig with how he feels. Like, it's insensitive to the concept. He didn't use the word, but that would already be a source to how the Rebbe used to conduct himself, that he would say, but that's just as an aside. In any event, we should be zeicha for Mashiach to come very soon, for us to be reunited with Alex, Avraham Shmuel, and we should continue celebrating and enjoy and rejoicing and only having good things. I appreciate everyone joining.
I mean, thank you.